good morning. Good. Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. My sacred partner, is on a mission of mercy. Mercy. So, we have to push on without her. Thank you for showing up anyhow. Let's see if we got some sound. There we go. We're deep into our 100 days of reflections, intentions. We started at 100 days before the election. We felt that the time was so significant, that we need to prepare during this time. Also, it was a really significant time in our calendar. We were recovering from the days of grief, moving into the days of consolation, coming into the month of Elul, preceding the days of awe. So in preparation for the days of awe, we felt that we need to go deeper, We owe people who join us the depth of teachings that we're familiar with, and to present them carefully and with depth. So we looked at each other, and like we did when we did the Psalms project. Well, let's do what we know. So we're going to teach a little bit from the sources. We'll bring some poetry. We speak poetry here as well as prose. And some teachings from Mesilat Yesharim, Luzzatto, our man Luzzatto. Interesting book. Definitely prose. So I only have so much patience for that, to be honest with you. But it's an ethical treatise, training the inner world, so to speak, for higher forms of living, higher responses to the challenges of life. And I should continue talking about Luzzatto. I brought a little bit of him in yesterday, 18th century. Interesting person. And I don't want to spend too much time on his story, though. It's a story, it's an interesting story, but comes from an interesting family, and I brought that background yesterday. It was in the library of his teacher that he was introduced to Kabbalistic stuff, and that got him into some trouble in his life. It was too close to the false messiahs of the 16th century, and so he was a victim of that. Luzzatto began to learn and teach the works of the Holy Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, master of Kabbalah and poet of the holy city Sfat. Luzzatto studied this Hebrew poetry and prosody, and he began composing in classical Hebrew before he was 20. He wrote an elegy in verse over the death of his teacher, Cantarini. At 20, Luzzatto was working on a book of Psalms, the Psalter, based on the classical book of Psalms. And he's 20 years old. He composed 150 of them, like in the style of the psalmist. And his creations were so true to the style of the Tehillim, of the Psalms, that his teachers criticized him for immodest, let's call it, creativity. And only 2 of his poems exist for certain that were once included in Luzzatto's Book of Psalms. And I'll just say this, I'll stop there for now about Luzzatto. One of his primary teachings is about humility. When you're building character in the way that he describes in his book, Mesilat Yesharim, it's really important, the principle of humility and hunger, to be humble enough to receive teachings, and where teachings exist, where there are sources, to receive them, to be humble, to receive them. And secondly, to be hungry for them. It's not just enough to apprentice yourself to somebody, to be hungry for the teachings. And that's another one of his principles. Humble and hungry. So he violated this, I guess, he grew up, You have to remember he's only 20 years old when he wrote a book of Psalms. And he was criticized for not being humble enough in his creative work. I'm going to start this morning with a piece on grief. It's in our vocabulary now. Some of the other language is not in our vocabulary right now, but grief is in it. Grief, this is called. Grief, a word, it's called. Grief, a word. Is that what it is, or is that what it's called? That's Alice in Wonderland. Grief, a word. A word here or there touches. Most of the language does not. Souls, the non-physical souls bound up together. Leave out the jussives. Say it. Souls bound up together. Healing for those we know. For those we don't know. Patience for time. Comfort. What can be comforted? I don't know about healing. The word has fallen out my vocabulary, replaced by the elegant love. Only love has the power to heal. But first, sighs and sniffles, a vocabulary of sounds, groans, moans, and synonyms, the music of grief. The inside language of sorrow, when love hurts. Amen. Written for someone I don't know. I'm going to capture something in our intentioning to take us into the ascending arc, where we are directed to go, where we're the ascending arc towards the days of awe, in spite of Avtulochus, in spite of That's a tune from an old Sephardi melody. You know, and our take a clue from our calendar. We we sat 3 weeks in grief in the summertime, and then when that has elapsed, we move into the 7 weeks of consolation, the complete 10. The 7 weeks of consolation, each week we get a message from Isaiah. The table balanced for comfort. Sadness pulled from the secret forest dark, free from change, from chains, with gradual revelation of toward, because the pull of from is strong. So think of that ratio: 3 weeks of grief, 7 weeks of consolation till the days of awe. We are in the 7 weeks now, calculating the weights, the sadness that sits on our hands, lingers on our heart line. But there's a line that's thrown down, a line. My lines are left in pleasant places, as the psalmist says. And you can take a hold of that line. The line, Makam Hijaz. Pull yourself up. Okay, so I'm going to read a piece and then close up for today. I was having a discussion with Rabbi Nachman, speaking of pulling up a line. The line extended, I grab hold of it, lifts me up. This is called Narrow Bridge. He has an image that he uses that the whole world, and people sing this song, but they sing it incorrectly, by the way. I looked it up, and the verse that he actually cites, the language that he cites is don't make yourself afraid. The song that everybody sings when they're young is "Don't be afraid." The world is a narrow bridge. It's kind of a dark message. The main thing is not to be afraid. But the way the text is written in Rabbi Nachman's book is actually don't make yourself. Don't add to it. There's what to be afraid about. Don't add to it. So we were sitting out in front of the coffee shop, myself and Rabbi Nachman. How afraid are you? Asked Nachman. Before you answer, look at me. Don't make yourself crazy. That's not a great thing to tell a kid who might be sitting alone with dark thoughts, I said, or a depressed adult. Ask yourself, what might get in your way, said Nachman. So you might get depressed. I've been depressed. There's reason to be depressed. Then there's depression without reason. I think there is a sadness associated with existence, I said under my breath. Of course, said Nachman, you might come to a gate or a bridge and the gate will be closed or closing or hard to push through. The bridge is narrow, but you move ahead. You might have to pass over a narrow bridge. The principle is not to make yourself afraid. Oh, I said, don't be afraid. I didn't say that, said Nachman. There are reasons for fear. Don't add to them. Don't make yourself afraid. I heard there's a tree in Ukraine whose leaves take 100 years to grow. Time takes time, said Nachman. Patience. Patience, patience, I said. I breathed into it. Listen, said Nachman, find some good inside, within yourself, attached to it. Strengthen yourself with whatever you have within, no matter how small, and glue yourself to it. Find your strength. What's that you're doing? Writing, I said. Well, that's the message for today, little babies. It's a good message. Thanks to Rabbi Nachman. in our conversation in front of the coffee house. Don't make yourself afraid. Don't add to it. And attach to something good. You can find it. Strengthen yourself in it. All right, kids. Thanks for joining this morning. My sacred partners on a mission of mercy. And she will be back with us soon. And, we appreciate your presence here very much. I appreciate you. See you soon.